bolt-action rifles, bayonets, blood, gore, and decapitation. There's only one game I could be talking about without being put in a mental institution, and of course I'm talking about RO2 Rising Storm. It started out as a mod, and with the help of Tripwire Interactive, it's become a really polished extension to the RO2 franchise. I have to say, some of the things you see in this game you're not going to see anywhere else, and the feeling you get when you shoot and that ragdoll effect takes over will absolutely blow your mind in some situations. Now let's talk about one or two downers before we get onto the excitement of this game. There's two little issues we have. The Americans are very technological advanced, and obviously people will say, well, historically that's fine, but in a game sense where people want it to be more balanced and want it to be more challenging, in situations where you've got an M1 Grand and you're coming up against someone with a bolt action rifle, the ability to follow up shots can really make the difference, and you will find yourself sometimes raging a little bit inside, but there's nothing more satisfying of coming up on a guy with your bolt action rifle, he's got an M1 or a Thompson, you take him out in that first shot and you drop him. And that's the great thing with bolt action rifles, is they're hard hitting and will put the targets down fast. Here I'm defending a little objective, and I'm using my heavy machine guns that I've really got a big feeling for now, and they're really nice to hold onto and fire, and I can really predict the bullet spread on them. So let's get on to the positives. Enough of the negative stuff, we don't want to hear about that. Moving on to the positives now. I personally really like the heavy machine guns. The feeling of them and the kick of them feels so good. I mean, and the ability not to have to bring them to your eye level really affects the game as well. As you see, I just ran into that room, I shot a few rounds, everyone panicked in there, I dropped one or two of them, and they were panicking. You saw them all try to scurry out, and they were like, oh no, there's a crazy Jap in the corner with a heavy machine gun. Well, I'm waiting outside here, I know they're all going to be watching that door, and this is the sort of intense sort of moments you get. You don't get it with other sort of first person shooters these days, where you know that if they hit you once, they could drop you. There is a small bandaging system in this, but basically it's only for light leg and arm wounds. If you get shot in the chest, you are going to be going down, and there's nothing you can do about it, and that's what I really like about it. It is, if you mess up, you are dead. And that's what I like about this game. If you screw up, you run into the open, you make a silly choice, you will be dead. And that is what makes it a real challenge to play. Obviously, the objective mode you're probably asking about. Well, there is a territory mode. That's basically you take over different sorts of territories in different areas in an attacking order or defending order. There's a larger campaign mode. Basically what the campaign mode is, it has a map, and the squads like vote on where to capture and where to take over, and it's a really interesting sort of thing because it involves that sort of group voting, but on the same side you've got like different areas to hold and take over, so it's like a capture and hold but on a larger map scale, if you can understand what I'm going on about. If you don't, then you know I'm just waffling in a corner with a Type 99. But apart from that, let's talk about the Americans versus the Japanese in this sort of situation. Obviously I'm not going to bring up real historical facts because it's just a game at the end of the day, but obviously we've got the technological advantage of the Americans, and how strong is it in this game? I've briefly mentioned it before, but the problem is that the Americans have got so many machine guns and different weapons, it can be a real challenge at times as the Japanese army. And the thing that you want to know about is probably the banzai charge and how well that actually works. I probably mispronounced that, that doesn't really matter though. It doesn't work as effectively as it was led to be said in the earlier videos. It was made out to be it was the ultimate tactic, and you need 10-20 guys to actually pull it off, otherwise you can get mowed down really easily. But otherwise the feeling of that banzai charge and the multiple people running at once feels absolutely amazing, and there's not really a feeling like it you can get in many other games. Apart from that, let's talk about the flamethrower. The flamethrower, you're probably saying, wow, that sounds cool, and the flamethrower is absolutely amazing, but there is one draw side to it. When you're the Japanese forces, there's not much you can do in some defensive positions, especially when the Americans are holding a position. If he's in a corner with a flamethrower, let's just hope he runs out of ammunition, or the game's going to be over for you rather fast. Here I'll make a little mistake and fall through this hole in the board, and break my legs and die. See, one mistake, one death. Let's move on to the M1 Grand here. The M1 Grand in many video games has been one of my favourite rifles, and here it doesn't let me down either. It's very accurate, and it's got its nice 8-round clip, and it's got that chinging noise. And in many games where that doesn't make too much difference, they've really made it loud. So if you're reloading or you drop that ammunition clip, basically the guy in the next room is going to hear you, and he will come in with his bayonet fully charged and try to kill you. Japanese officers is another thing we want to talk about. There's a few different things that the Japanese have to benefit them, and one of them is the katana sword. And you're probably thinking now, wow, that sounds really cool, and that's the problem. officers that need to throw the smoke grenades don't throw them because they're bloody running around with a bloody sword. So the Japanese army even struggle even more to get closer. There's an officer with his bloody katana. I take him out, he chops my arm, and decapitation does work in this game, but luckily I was fine for the moment. I could have had no hand, and I would have been out the game slowly bleeding to death. Right, moving back downstairs. The thing is with this game, you've got to use as much cover as possible, and with the ball action rifle versus the semi-automatic, it's a little bit unfair, and sometimes you do feel like you're getting purposely the advantage. Obviously the Americans can choose the Springfield, but that's like saying, would you rather have an advantage, or wouldn't you? So what do you do? I mean, in 9 out of 10 situations, the Americans will choose Springfield. There was a nice flamethrower. I panic here thinking that the guy was going to run in that room, so I throw a grenade, but it still appears in front of me. And then if you take a quick look at the right-hand corner, that panic grenade that I thought was going to kill a friendly ends up killing 2 Japs that happened just to run through that window. So, you know, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Now let's make a little roundup onto this situation. How does it compare against the original game? Well, there's a lot of advantages, a lot of disadvantages. I can't say the factions are perfectly balanced between them, but the experience you get is a lot more compact and it's a lot more close quarters than the original Red Orchestra. And if you like the close quarters sort of gameplay and this fluent sort of hand movement that's like an aiming dead zone, it is probably going to be better for you than the original game of the Germans versus the Russians. Obviously, they're quite similar armies. Let's say the Americans and the Russians, how they play out. The Russians and the Americans have a lot of sort of heavy firepower weapons. I can't compare the Japanese to any of the other armies because they're very weak with the guns, but at the same time they have a lot of perks to try to help them get better. Basically, the more people that are in a banzai charge, the less effect that morale will take on you. That's another thing I'm going to get onto. Morale. How does morale work? You're probably going, oh, morale, well, basically, morale and your sort of combat awareness kind of goes down if you're suppressed under fire. Also, what's a really nifty feature is if, say, a guy's standing up on a wall next to you and his head explodes, your character loses it and basically your screen starts to go grayer, and the grayer it is, the harder it is to aim and so on. So it reenacts suppression, but it also reenacts things that the character would be feeling. So if your friend's head just blows off, then you're going to panic. Here's a panicking situation. I have to reload my gun quickly behind the cheese stand because I thought this guy was going to see me, but he doesn't. He walks right past me. And that's sometimes the thing that'll happen in this game. A guy will walk right past you, he's took out my comrade on the floor, so I can't let him get away with it. And there he is. I hope you enjoyed this. I just wanted to show you briefly about it, and I just wanted to show how much I enjoyed the heavy machine guns. So check out some of the other videos, and most of all, check out Red Orchestra 2 Rising Storm, and I'll see you around.